everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. Today, I am joined by Dr. Janell Harvey, who is one of several authors of the book Cyber Bros. Make sure everybody can see it. That light is always in the way. Won't let me be great. I'll put it in front of my face. All right. So, Cyber Bros Against Cyberbullying, an activity book to help battle bullies online. Welcome to the show, Dr. Harvey.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell.
So, before we get into the book, I would love for you to tell our listening audience about your background, and then we'll get into some parts of the book.
Sure. Well, I worked in higher ed initially as an adjunct back in 2002. I eventually became a full professor, so I have a span of years working in higher ed. Presently, I am a fundraising consultant, so I work with nonprofits, churches, and schools throughout the U.S. in the areas of fund development and nonprofit incorporation. Anyone who's interested in learning more can actually find me on multiple platforms via Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
I love it. It's actually really interesting to see the evolution of professionals that find themselves in higher ed. I think about my background. I started in healthcare in 92, and literally 5 years later into the industry, found myself working as an adjunct. And I really went to do that job primarily because in the office as a medical assistant, I would see these new grads come out and I would be like, "You didn't learn that in school?" And they're like, "No," right? So I was like, I'm going to go, into the classroom and really help bring the real world to life because, as you know, the real world isn't about theory, right? You need to apply the concepts. And so it's 2025. I started that process in 97. And like you, spent some time working as a full time professor. And then found myself not doing that, going back to adjunct. And I realized I love being an adjunct professor because I am adding to what the full timers are bringing, but I am really adding that real world perspective that is needed for the future to be successful.
Great.
So, speaking of adjuncts, like you, I started in the classroom and then transitioned online. And so, one of the things I found quite interesting about your book was about cyberbullying. And you wrote this book with your sons, but really, adults are being cyberbullied every day. And I really think it's important that we reach kids earlier in life, make sure they understand about bullying. Because now, as I think about my kids who are 26 to like 33, I wonder, and I'm going to actually ask them if they were bullied in school. And then our youngest daughter, who actually was in college during the pandemic, had to pivot to online. So I wonder the number of people who have been bullied, not just children, but adults and children, because I believe the number is a lot higher than we all probably know.
Absolutely. I think workplace bullying is probably the worst because I've experienced it myself, often based on gender, race, jealousy, and it's inevitable in some situations, but it's important for adults and kids to know how to navigate through it.
Absolutely. Ooh, you just literally triggered me with that workplace bullying because it is a real thing. And I think if you are not self-aware, you're not educated on what bullying looks like. So in the workplace, we probably call it like microaggressions.
Right.
It can really be damaging to your self-esteem, and really cause you to go to a dark place. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful that I knew what it was. And when it hit me, I was like, oh no. I literally, listen, then we gonna talk about the book. I literally was in this meeting and was like, I will not be held hostage by salary and benefits,
Mhm.
because I realize that I am the talent and you're not gonna bully me. It's just not
Absolutely.
gonna happen. But so many people deal with it because they're like, how am I gonna pay my bills? Right. So talking about it with kids, I believe, will leave a long lasting impression as they navigate to adulthood. And just like kids can be pretty cruel, so can adults.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I know the book is titled Cyber Bros Against Cyberbullying. And that is more than a book. So tell us about the organization. And then, audience, I promise we'll get into the book. But you all know we cannot tell you everything that's in this book because you have to get your own copy. But I also think it's important that we use this platform to let others know about your organization, the work that you're doing, and then we can get into the book.
Thank you. So my son, who was 12 at the time, was attending a school where the kids were just mean, which is commonplace for most uh, elementary, middle schools. They would call him names. They would pick at him. They would try to start fights with him. And it just really hurt his self esteem. So we found an opportunity for him to learn about nonprofit management as a middle schooler at Purdue. So he was teamed up with a professor there and a man named Shagman Laurie. He owns a program called My Pal. It's an app for schools. So if there's like a fight, if there's bullying, the principal or teacher just push the app and then the necessary officials will come and deal with the situation. So by working with those individuals, TJ decided he wanted to start a nonprofit called Cyber Bros Against Cyberbullying. Right now, it operates under my LLC. I'm just trying to teach him and the other guys that work with him how to do planning and research. And hopefully by the end of the year, it will become an actual nonprofit. So the title is derived from the name of his company.
I love it. And as I'm writing my second book, I realize how it's important to be intentional about your book, because depending on your book, it's more than just a book, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the fact that you are teaching your son early in life about nonprofit, for profit organization, just business in general. And honestly, as I think back on that song that Whitney Houston wrote, I believe the children are our future, teach them well, let them lead the way. I think that that speaks volumes to what she meant we should be doing. Unfortunately, some parents have missed the mark on that. And I think part of it is from that lack of biblical foundation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bible says, teach the child the way they should go. When they get old, they will not depart from it. And I think that, among other things, contribute to what we're seeing playing out with the kids today.
Absolutely.
S-
I agree.
s- So tell us a little bit about, we don't want to know everything about TJ's situation, but just a little bit about how the bullying started to occur.
So he is 1 year behind everyone. He was actually put up a grade. So his maturity was probably not where the other kids were, but he's a very bright young man. They would call him out of his name, and some kids followed him into a restroom one day and took videos and did a bunch of unnecessary things. And we took it to the officials we thought would do something about it, and they didn't. So we ended up putting him in another school, and he's doing a phenomenal job where he is. Actually, yesterday was Valentine's Day, and a group of kids, they could pay to have a student serenaded. So the entire junior class sung "I Love You Just the Way You Are" to him for Valentine's Day. So that really helped his self esteem. But as you know, words are things. You spoke about the Bible. So when God said, "Let there be light," there was light. So you just have to be careful with the things that you say because they can have a long lasting effect on people.
Wow, wow. You're making me just tear up a little bit because I remember growing up in the church and how much confidence the church gave me, from the Easter speeches to being an usher to singing in the choir to going to Baptist training union to go to all the different things that I went to. I realized that they truly contributed to who I am as a mother, as a wife, as a grandmother, as a person, as a friend. That foundation was so solid, but so many kids don't have that foundation. And that old saying that hurt people.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think is in the forefront of minds today, but doesn't get enough attention, is how bullying can impact you mentally, physically, the relationships. So talk to us about how the book addresses those mental and relationship issues, how it affects them.
Sure. So there are a couple of different activities in the book. There are prayers that specifically deal with particular issues pertaining to bullying. So if you're dealing with unforgiveness, there's a prayer in there that deals with unforgiveness. If you want to pray that God will change somebody's heart, there's a prayer specifically that says prayers again to change the bully's heart. So there are prayers in there that are biblically based. There are crossword puzzles. There are short stories with discussion questions. And all of those activities we attempted to align with Indiana academic standards. So if a teacher wants to include that in her curriculum, if her principal or his principal will allow him to, there's opportunity for that.
I love that. And as an adult, I still love to do crossword puzzles. I also like the fact that you have some questions, right? Because I think when you read something, um, you need time to process it. And so the questions give you an opportunity to pause and think. That's probably the educator in you. It's like, hey, we need to have some questions in the book that will help, ensure that the message was received. So in the book, you talk about youth ambassadors. What's a youth ambassador?
Okay, so the way that his organization is structured, there's a CEO, which is Terrence, and then we have two youth ambassadors. One represents the Midwest. His name is Jason Anderson. So he creates different content for us to put on our Instagram page. So for Cyber Safety Week, which was last week, we had a host of different activities and informational or necessary information we posted on our page. So Miss Illinois kicked it off. Then one of my sorority sisters, who is also an attorney, she talked about the importance of staying safe online and different laws. And then Jason, who was our Midwest ambassador, gave us pointers as well. So in the South, we have Jacaden Jones. He is in the 6th grade. He hasn't developed any content yet. His mom is still working with him. But those two individuals will help us create videos and necessary content to express the importance of making sure we fray away from cyberbullying. And we could be found on Instagram.
I love it. I love it. So you mentioned sorority. What sorority are you with by
Sigma
chance?
Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated.
Oh yes, 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 yes. I just had to get that out there. Look, you opened the door, so I just walked straight in because that's my sorority as well. So I love the fact that you are reaching to the younger ages, because I think that by the time you get to high school, it's not that it's too late, but I think a lot of the damage has been done, and you literally have to pull your kid out of that space. And so now I'm thinking about, I have a niece who will be 15 this year. I have a nephew who will be 11. And so now this conversation is making me wonder, have they experienced bullying? So I'm definitely going to have the conversation with them. My niece in particular, she's very quiet, very smart. And so I always just send her a message that tells her, you can talk to me about anything. If you need me, text me, because young folks, they don't even want to talk on the phone. But if you need me, text me. I've gone on her field trips with her, 7th and 8th grade. And so I actually was able to see kind of the kids in action. And, because my kids are older, I was just like, oh, I don't know how these teachers deal with these kids because they could be a little untamed
Right.
at times. So I'm glad that you're reaching to the earlier years. And I think honestly, in kindergarten, right, is when those conversations need to be had because you want to prepare them, like not put something negative in their spirit, but just be able to say, hey, if this were to happen, come and talk to me about it, right? I
Right.
think back in the day, parents would be like, if somebody hits you, you hit them back, right?
Right.
But I think there's different ways that you can, talk to your kids about if they're being bullied, and violence is definitely not the first reaction.
Right.
So in the book, you talk about how storytelling can inspire action and awareness. What are some of the stories that you've been able to tell with your movement?
Well, Terrence's situation in particular, how sometimes people or young people can be offensive to others, and kids are so terrified as to what might happen or being retaliated against, so they don't necessarily come and tell their mom or dad what happened. So actually, Terrence just became sort of introverted and not necessarily telling us everything that happened. So one day I just sat down with him and he told me what was going on. So his dad and I went up to the school to try to make sure that a reprimand was in place for those kids. I've been able to share my own situations and bouts with low self esteem growing up. I've had a number of things to happen, but God is so good. He's allowed my life to turn around and transform and put me on a path of success. So I think those two things.
I love it. I think a lot of times we are ashamed to tell others about what has happened to us in the past for fear of being judged. And I don't know about you, but for me, telling my story has truly allowed me to move away from it, realizing that it didn't happen to me um, for nothing, right? It was so that I can help others who may be thinking about doing something before they do it, right? I could be the vehicle to just help them understand that there are options that are available for you. But then also for those that are like struggling with dealing with whatever their situation is, seeing somebody on the other side of it. And I personally can't say that like when in elementary school and high school that I was bullied. However, as I was thinking about the bullying concept in the book, I'm reminded of one incident in high school where this girl and her brothers and sisters kind of jumped on me. That was like in sixth grade. And I to this day, I don't even know why that happened. I happen to be friends with the person on Facebook. I don't even know if they remember that situation. I've moved on from it. But then I also remember in high school, these girls surrounding me regarding my daughter's father. We had a baby, after high school ended. And so I remember those girls surrounding me. They were in the gang. I was not in the gang. I was definitely a nerd. But then miraculously, my friends surrounded them and the situation quickly dispersed. So I really don't know what that's like. But I do know it from that workplace perspective, and it's so damaging. It can be damaging to your spirit and your soul. And so I'm glad for resources like this. And my desire is that parents that are listening to this episode, that you, number one, be more in tune to when your children's persona changes, right? Now, of course, they are going to change when those hormones start kicking in, right? But when you notice that the personality, the person that you know them to be, if there's a shift in that's kind of like a sign that something is going on, and you owe it to yourself as a parent to find out what that something is.
Hmm.
So now, how was it for you as parents trying to navigate that situation that you and your husband like have a conversation about what the plan was going to be? What did that look like?
Yeah, we did tell him what he needed to do going forward, but we were most concerned about the administrators when he's outside of our view. So when he's at school, what plan was going to be in place to protect him, and it didn't seem to go anywhere. So that's why we needed to find a plan B. So
So you were persistent in your approach to resolving the issue, acknowledging and resolving. And I get it.
mhm,
These teachers and administrators, they are, pulled in many different
mhm,
directions, but I believe some of the incidents that we see play out at these schools could have been avoided if we would have just taken the time to stop, talk, come up with a plan, as opposed to just put it on our list of things that we need to address.
right. When you look at the news and all the school shootings and suicides, that's just nothing you should take lightly. So if you can nip something in the bud and make sure those things don't happen, then it's necessary to just try. So.
Yeah, I love it. And as a adult watching that stuff on the news, it is so hurtful.
Mhm,
And I don't know if it's because I have like this addictive personality, but I'm always when it happens, I already watch the news a lot. But now I'm like glued to the TV, waiting to hear how it unfolded and really thinking about what could have been done to prevent it. And I know that a lot of these kids have a lack of social skills because of the fact that, and I'll just speak for myself. My parents got divorced when I was 9, my sister was 5, and so we luckily had my grandparents and my aunts and uncles that literally stepped in, and we didn't miss a beat. But kids today, they don't have that concept of community within the neighborhood, right? Because now these kids are like, you can't tell me what to do. You're not my
right.
mama, you're not my daddy, right? They real serious about that.
Mhm,
And so we as adults have to figure out what our approach is going to be with that young person. But I also think that it's important to teach our kids early on about emotional intelligence, right?
mhm.
Being able to control your emotions, but also recognize when you're being triggered by something and what do I do when that happens.
Right. Absolutely.
So, in the book, or one of the premises behind the book is you talk about how schools, families, communities can work together. I just want to know, how do you do that in a time in the times that we're living in? And I think back to the pandemic, how we were all confined to our homes. I've been in my house for 20 years, and I kid you not, during the pandemic was when I really got to know my neighbors. I think because everybody was at home, we were coming outside. And so now we developed this bond that is needed. So when something does happen in the neighborhood, like we got a neighbor across the street who likes to have parties, had big gigantic parties during the pandemic, and we were all just texting each other and on it. But how do we how do schools and families and communities work together?
I think that nonprofits and churches could take the charge on that. I worked for an organization called Communities and Schools a long time ago. And the overarching goal of that nonprofit was to partner schools, communities, etc., to focus on the quality of life for children. So if nonprofits can partner, or if there's like a PTA and they can reach out, just establishing communication so that collaborations can start and focus on, as you mentioned, social emotional learning for kids. And some kids may act a certain way because they don't have food at home, or maybe they don't have clothing, or maybe they don't have a dad in the home who tells them he loves them. Then there are mentoring programs. So I think there's all sorts of collaborations that don't exist that could have a positive impact on children.
I love that. And I think we as adults, we have to volunteer in these schools to be that positive role model because I was fortunate in that my grandfather, who currently is 104 years old, he
Wow.
took us to church. He made us dinner. He gave us snacks, right? He did all of those things with us that I personally never felt like I wasn't loved. I've never felt like, well, there was that one time I did feel like I wasn't loved, but that's another story for another day.
Okay.
Um, but I feel like, I had that village that
Mhm.
guided me, that protected me. Now, did they protect me from everything that happened in life? No, because there are some things that did happen that in the grand scheme of things didn't necessarily impact who I am as an adult. But I really believe it takes a village. My husband and I recently went into an elementary school for career day to, talk about the work that we both do. And I think more of that is needed because during career days, you always hear about, policemen, firemen, nurses, lawyers, doctors, but there's so many things that kids can do today. And let's just face it, these kids are different. And the
Right.
things that we like to do, they don't really like to do. And
Mhm.
so we need to just show them the many sides of the workplace and life so that they can take that information and use it how they want to. I'm learning very quickly, having adult children, that you can give them information, but ultimately they're going to do, what they want to do with it. And when they come to you and ask for advice, you can't be judgmental, right? You got to listen. You have to be emotionally intelligent
Right.
when you're dealing with the young people.
I agree.
So, what does the future hold? So, you have the nonprofit, you have the book. What are some other things that we haven't already talked about that you're doing to not only raise awareness about this topic, but other things that you may be doing to help support our future generations?
So our ultimate goal is to partner with attorneys. We want to help kids that may want to pursue that as a passion, and find some way to make that a focus of our organization. So maybe there are some kids who want to be criminal defense attorneys for juveniles, or they want to work with juvenile delinquents. So we hope to incorporate that some sort of way into the organization later on. And we do have a couple of other books that will be forthcoming, maybe not this year, but in the years to come.
Isn't it like crazy? Like you write that first book and then you're like, oh, I think, like when I wrote my first book, I think five other topics literally came to mind while
Hmm.
I was in the middle of writing that book. And so I first of all, I realized um, you got to eat, right? So you can't spend all your days and nights
Right.
writing. But when you have something that's in your heart, in your spirit, a story that needs to be told, resources that people need to help navigate life, to me, it's your responsibility to
Mhm.
make those things available. And so I am actually seeing book clubs for young Black men to teach them about the importance of reading. I was fortunate that my father forced us to go to the Chicago Public Library when I was a kid, but that really helped me develop this love for reading. And as I was going through my academic journey, I think I forgot how much I loved reading. And so several years ago, once I got back on my reading journey, it really has been life changing, but also it is a much needed distraction from everything that's going on in life. When you can just sit down, read a book, reflect, think. Sometimes I'm crying as I'm reading the book. I'm writing in the margins, and I'm just really, um, in some ways, protecting myself from a lot of the negative energy that the world could have.
I agree. Yes, reading is can take you to all sorts of places with never leaving your home. So yes, reading
Yes.
is necessary.
Absolutely. So our time is almost up. You've already told our listening, viewing audience where they could find you when this episode airs. We'll have your social media sites and all of those streaming across the bottom. But before we leave, do you have any final words for our listening, viewing audience? Anything you want to say to the heart of a parent that maybe has noticed that their child is experiencing something?
Mhm.
Um, Take the time to do that now.
Okay. Before I do that, if you are a student at Purdue, our book is actually in Purdue University's library. So if you go to school in Hammond, you can get a copy. They have several copies there. So they were generous enough to do that. And then secondly, I don't think you should ever like shoo off your son or daughter's emotions. If you feel like there's something going on, if they become introverted and extremely reserved, then take some time to try and speak with them. Maybe they won't talk to you initially, but I was watching a video where a young lady who didn't share things with her mom committed suicide. And we never want to hear about your child or mine losing their life to something that could have been prevented. So love on your babies. Let them know you love them every day. Tell them they're important and they're special. Don't be so hard on them. Every little thing doesn't deserve a whooping or a verbal lashing. But let your kids know you love them and try to be there for them as much as you can.
Oh, I love that. And previously being a single parent myself, it's difficult when you feel like a team of one trying to navigate parenthood and being an adult. But just know that there are resources that are out there available for you. You can check out Dr. Harvey's non for profit, but there are so many resources out there. You owe it to yourself and your child to tap into those resources so that you can prevent something from happening.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Harvey, I am thankful that you stopped by 52 Authors, 52 Weeks with your book, Cyber Bros Against Cyberbullying. And we didn't talk a whole lot about the cyberbullying, but I think everybody nowadays knows it's that, social media situation where it originates online and then plays out in
Mhm.
the malls and at school. So I think everybody knows that. But I also want to highlight, and you mentioned this, but it's an activity book of prayers, puzzles, and stories to help battle bullies online. And I love the packaging of those resources.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, this has been another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with someone that needs this information. So any parent, tag your friends that are parents, grandparents, because sometimes grandparents have to take the role of the parents, but share it with those that you believe need this information. Until next week.